Oh, come on. Come on. Come Remember GoldenEye? Not the game, that's been covered to death. I mean the movie GoldenEye, Pierce Brosnan's first and best Bond film. To an 11-year-old in 1995, this was the coolest movie of all time. Brosnan was the most badass guy on the planet, and Flippy Jetspoon was the hottest person to have ever made every boy in America feel the funnies in his no-no place. At the time, I was in a unique position to have already seen and adored most of the Bond films that came before it. GoldenEye was not my first, but it was probably the most impactful. And while Brosnan may have been let down by every single writer, producer, and director for the next 3 Bond films, he apparently saw some success in technically his last role as Bond, 007 Everything or Nothing. This was an entirely original story in the Bond universe, and I jumped in hoping for a redemption story to wash the bad taste of Brosnan's last 3 films out of my mouth. Look, I don't think Tomorrow Never Dies was terrible, it was just underwhelming coming after GoldenEye, and The World Is Not Enough was just kind of boring. Though the game based on it is actually excellent, especially the Nintendo 64 version, but I'm not saying anything revelatory there. And the less said about Die Another Day, the better, so... No, I will say this. I've only ever fallen asleep in the theaters to one movie in my entire life, and it was Die Another Day. That entire train wreck is the biggest, dumbest, corniest piece of shit to have ever been born from this earth. No, don't put that on my tombstone.
I'm totally putting that on your tombstone.
Stop it!
Hello?
Hang that call up.
Tombstone guy,
No.
I'd like to place an order, please.
You listen to me, you little shit. Cancel that order.
Cancel this dick.
Give me the Now, I knew Everything or Nothing existed, and I might have even rented it in 2003, but I don't know, back then I was of the mind, if you're gonna have a Bond game, it has to be a first-person shooter, and anything else is just an insult to the sacred institution of shooting guys in their dicks. But that was then. That was in 2003, that was 18 years ago. I was 19 at the time, and I've done a lot of growing up since then. And I kinda want the channel to do a lot of growing up too. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and there are a lot of channels on here reviewing games who are doing the silly things, who are, doing the jokes and the laughs. I mean, the Angry Video Game Nerd has been doing this for a very long time. Maybe I should take the other angle. Maybe start covering these works of art with the, maturity they deserve. I mean, I have friends and family who watch this. Maybe I should start acting my age. That wasn't me. That was... Get out of here, Poochie. That was my dog. She got IBS. Oh, God. This is the worst timing ever. This entire event represents the exact opposite of what I was just saying. Oh, she's farting with every step. Stop it. This is so immature. How many of you are left? 3. All right, let's get going.
Can I have my phone back now?
Boy, the story in this one is just weird. EA kinda did here what they did with GoldenEye Rogue Agent and just borrowed villains from previous Bond generations like Jaws and then added all new characters like Nikolai Diavolo, played by Willem Dafoe.
You've come on a fool's errand. 003. Sometimes I think MI6 assigns your numbers based on your IQ. A friend of yours? You'll have to do better than that! It's bulletproof! Enjoy a slow but inevitable death, 003. Do I have to do all the dirty work? Get him!
Dude was hot off the heels of Spider-Man at this point. He could have chosen anything, and he just called his agent and went, "Man, give me a Bond game now, man." And then he smiled so wide, he called upon Cthulhu to wash the earth clean of heathens. Only 90s kids will remember that. This is why I don't go off script. God, that guy's weird, too. He's halfway between "Please don't eat me" and "I want to know what you feel like." I just want to touch your face, dude. Actually, they got a lot of talent here to lend their looks and voices. Judi Dench is here, denching it up. Shannon Elizabeth was hired because hot. Heidi Klum just clumming everywhere. And John Cleese reprises his role as Q. Oh, God. Can't even say the word Q anymore without shuddering. You know what? Thanks a lot, you batshit conspiracy crazies, for ruining 2 great characters for the rest of us non-smooth brains. Fuckers. The story isn't bad by any stretch, it's just also kind of what you'd expect a Bond game story from 2003 to be. It's mostly nanobots. The fuck? Stop that shit, probably. And with a Bond story comes all the double crosses and shady characters you'd expect 007 to encounter. I mean, it's solid. It's not exceptional, but it's solid. But I have to say, there are some scenes in this game that would not fly today. There is one where you sneak into a house and there's a woman on a masseuse table, and when I walked close, there was a prompt. Naturally, I hit the prompt. Who doesn't hit a prompt? You see a prompt, you hit the prompt. And she's naked, and Bond is there just giving her a massage, and she doesn't know he's not the masseuse, and it was weird. No, the story wasn't the thing that grabbed me first here. Immediately upon popping into the first mission, I was just kind of struck by how pretty it all was. This thing was a showpiece for 2003. This is what I would have popped in to show off my Xbox to friends if I had any. Sharp textures, excellent lighting, and the driving sections have some really cool baked reflections that just make it all look really good. They even kind of nailed the likeness of Brosnan. I mean, about as well as they could have for that generation. And to his credit, he doesn't sound like he's phoning it in. All the time.
Time to pay Diablo a personal visit.
But James, that's impossible. You'd have to win one of his races.
Automobile races.
He collects exotic cars, flies in the drivers, has dinner with the winner.
So all I have to do is switch places with one of the drivers.
Even if you could, what makes you think you can win?
I can't afford to lose.
Performance-wise, the game does take a hit here and there, especially when a lot of effects are going off, but for the most part, those severe dips are isolated to the cutscenes. It runs just fine, and I never ran into a situation where I felt like bad performance was affecting my God-given right to shoot guys in their dicks. No, that would be the controls. Everything or Nothing institutes a lock-on mechanic for its gunplay. Alright, naturally, a lock-on system is going to do one of two things. It's either going to make a game too easy if you can just lock on to enemies and just kill them instantly, or it's going to make it too difficult if the lock-on system is busted in any way. Locking onto enemies is simple enough. You hold the left trigger, bam, you're locked on. But you can't lock onto enemies you see, only enemies Bond can see. In other words, if you start getting hit from behind and naturally you swing the camera around to see who the fuck is about to get moited, holding the left trigger to then lock onto that enemy does nothing. Why? Because you've turned the camera around, but you haven't turned Bond around. No, you need to turn both the camera and Bond around to face the guy, and then you can lock onto them. Now, this doesn't seem like a hassle at first, just an inconvenience, but after the game was over, I lost count of how many times I was shotgunned to death, in the face, to death, with a shotgun, by someone who I saw and who I desperately tried to shoot, but since they were just outside Bond's field of view, I was killed, in the face by a shotgun. I never got used to it, and although it ultimately didn't affect my enjoyment of the game, I wish they had just made a few more tweaks. Luckily, if someone does run up on you, you can always rely on good old-fashioned fisticuffs. Punching dudes is easy enough, just mash the Y or X buttons and let Bond do the rest. You can get fancy and flip guys and all that cool jazz if you want to learn it. Why did I say it like that? I don't know. Why did I misspell Bond as bind 200 times in the script? Don't know that either. I'm leaving this in. Everyone should know how stupid I am in real life. It also has all the obligatory stealth stuff you'd expect, like sneaking up on dudes and taking them out from behind. It all feels snappy and fun. I mean, they rarely force you into melee, but they do introduce some enemies later on who are pretty heavily armored. And while a well-aimed headshot will always do the trick, it's more fun to run up on them and introduce them to Bond's two favorite guns, righty and lefty. Just hope there isn't a shotgun guy off screen who you haven't seen yet, but who is about to introduce you to what your insides look like as it's gonna happen. A real lot. Difficulty overall is a weird beast in this one. If you're using the lock-on mechanic the right way, which means bashing your head against it until it does a thing, you can mow down a room full of guys. It's pretty easy. After locking onto an enemy, you can also further fine-tune your aim and move the reticle around to target specific parts of their bodies. It's neat, but at the same time, Bond's about as solid as a used tissue. Baddies can melt your health off real quick if you're not careful, and there isn't any regenerating health at all. If you need to heal, you need to find an armor piece. Sometimes they're placed liberally around a level, and other times I made it through with just a sliver of health left. Checkpoints are also weird. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. I don't know. I didn't make the game. Fuck you looking at me for? It's inconsistent, and when the game cheap shots you with a guy hiding in a building with a shotgun you couldn't possibly have seen before it was too late, it can be infuriating. And then you get a shotgun and then blast dudes into oblivion and it feels great. Like I said, it's inconsistent, and this inconsistency carries over into the vehicle missions. The game has quite a few vehicle missions peppered throughout, and besides looking great, they feel good too. There's one in particular where you're on a motorcycle chasing down Jaws who just stole an oil tanker, and the sense of speed here is legitimately great. You're totally Terminator 2ing it too, since they give you a shotgun to blast dudes with, I mean, as well as some rockets and flamethrowers, but come on. You put me on a motorcycle, you give me a shotgun, I'm gonna try and see if I can shoot that guy's dick off from 200 yards. Some of these vehicle sections are a piece of cake. Some even have timers, and I immediately dread seeing timers in any game pre-360 PS3 era, but more often than not, I finish with plenty of time to spare. Others, like this helicopter one, are a giant pain in the ass, but it may be my fault. The way they have the controls here is right trigger to go forward, left trigger to reverse, and the left thumbstick moves the chopper up and down. This is backwards to me. It should be the other way around. The thumbstick should control direction and the trigger's the altitude. I could not wrap my giant superior brain around this. It's like someone changing your inverted controls and telling you to go play a round of... what's popular? Warzone? I had to replay this one specific mission maybe a dozen times before I finally got through it. And again, maybe this was just me, but goddamn, I have not struggled with controls like this in a long while. Controls are probably the biggest complaint you can throw at the game, but at the same time, this was 2003. We were still figuring out controls in 3D games. There were no standards. We were close, and this game is close, but it just misses the mark. And what Bond game would be complete without gadgets? They make a big deal right out of the gate with Bond's newest gadget, the Repel Gun. It's simple enough to use, but it doesn't really amount to anything. It's usually just, I gotta get over this 10-foot wall, and that's that. You also have your usual tech stuff like remote-controlled spiders and dart guns and flashbangs and even invisibility cloak, but honestly, 9 times out of 10, I just never even bothered with the gadgets. Why waste precious seconds fidgeting with the controls to get a spider out to sneak up on a guy and detonate when I can just shoot him? Preferably in the dick. You know, I've noticed on this channel I tend to focus on the negative a lot, even in games I thoroughly enjoyed, and I guess that kind of comes from just getting frustrated when small things keep a really great game from just truly shining and being excellent. That's the issue here. This is a great game, even 18 years later, and just some things hold it back from really truly standing the test of time and just being amazing, but damn, it's still a great achievement in popcorn action games. The variety alone is worth the price of admission. I mean, the myriad locales stretching from graveyards and castles to the extensive gameplay variety, this was one hell of a big swing in 2003, and for the most part, they totally pulled it off. There are some legitimately exhilarating set pieces here too, one of my favorites being this scene where you have to dive off a cliff after Serena, who was just thrown out of a helicopter.
She's fallen for you, James.
At first I was like, okay, cool, a cutscene. Before realizing I was not only in control, I had a motherfucking machine gun. I mean, granted, it took me about 9 tries to catch her, but fuck, that was a fun 9 attempts. I mean, there are a few fuck this missions peppered throughout, like one forced stealth mission which tasked you with stealing a race car driver's uniform and had a lot of insta-failed things in it, but the majority of missions are quick and tightly paced. And there's another example of a mission I feared the worst of. After stealing that uniform, you have to participate in a race, because of course there's a racing mission in a Bond game, but the driving mechanics here are tight and responsive, and the driver AI is smart but not rubber bandy or overly aggressive. I mean, it was awesome. And even when you do stumble into one of the bad missions, they rarely take more than 5 or 10 minutes to get through, and there are a lot of missions. They're all quick, breezy. I mean, this is a meaty package. And what Brosnan Bond game would be complete without a giant tank section? Throw in some turret sections and you got yourself a shooter from 2003, pal. Man, I feel stupid for waiting so long to play this one. I would have been in love with this game when I was 19. I mean, does it completely hold up to modern standards? Of course not. The controls, inconsistent difficulty, and some really creepy sexual assault keep it from truly shining in a modern age. Is it still a badass Bond game totally worth a fresh playthrough though? If you keep in mind this is an 18-year-old game, hell yes. This is definitely one of the best Bond games ever made. I'd put it up there with The World Is Not Enough and of course GoldenEye. And it's all the sweeter knowing Brosnan's last appearance as Bond wasn't one of the worst films ever made. There's also co-op and multiplayer, which I'm not going to cover here, but there is a channel called G-Man Lives who coincidentally had the same exact idea I had and reviewed Everything or Nothing 2 days before I posted mine, and he has a whole section on the co-op and multiplayer, and it's a great review. Check it out. Other than that, thank you everyone for watching, liking, subscribing, and all that good huge stuff. Oh, the huge. I just said the huge. The usual YouTube stuff. That's how I thank them. I just said the fucking huge.
Can I have my phone back? Please.
Oh my god, fucking here!
Ow!
Alright, that one was me.